Okay, good afternoon. My bad. Today we're going to speak about specialized tools for fire alarms, and the name of the brand is SDI. The installation of a fire detection equipment is a noble cause. It saves lives, protects property. But the installation of a fire alarm is only the first step. NFPA 72 provides the norms for the inspection and the maintenance of fire detection equipment. SDI is the factory that provides those tools that comply with NFPA 72. It reduces costs and it adds to a more professional outlook. I don't think any of us can deny that tools are important. So as you watch this, I'd like you to remember we're speaking about tools for testing. We are International W, manufacturers representative in Latin America and the Caribbean. We're your voice to the factory, but also the factory's voice to you. SDI is that manufacturer of UL-listed, factory-endorsed fire alarm testing tools. So there's a couple of reasons for inspecting and performing functional testing on fire alarms. One, to comply with NFPA 72. We all seem to gravitate toward NFPA, no matter what country we're in. Sometimes the laws in each individual country are not so well developed, so we fall back to the NFPA. The recommendations are important. Number two, save lives. That's the idea. That is why we installed, or you installed, the fire alarm detection panel. And lastly, it's good business. Maintenance contracts and functional testing benefit the end user as well as the installing company. Inspections and testing are programmed, thereby eliminating emergencies and unforeseen costs. And we're going to speak more about that part of it. So there's two types of tests you're going to see are mentioned in NFPA 72. One is a functional test. You need to prove that the detector detects. And that is done by introducing smoke, carbon monoxide, heat to the detector to put it into alarm. The other test is a sensitivity test, also required, also mentioned by NFPA 72. And this makes sure that the detectors are still in the range that they were supposed to be. Now, of course, we like to think, hey, it was installed, it's new, everything's working fine. But it just doesn't happen that way. And experience has shown organizations like NFPA that it doesn't happen. So the detectors, and this comes right from Chapter 14, the detectors shall be tested in place to ensure smoke entry into the sensing chamber and alarm response. That's NFPA 72. Each detector shall be tested for operation by introducing smoke or simulated smoke into the detecting chamber. Yes, and here are some ways that you could do that, and possibly you've done that or are still doing that. However, there's a quicker, more efficient, and certainly more professional way of testing. So as we talk about SDI, we're going to talk about the tools that you can use for testing smoke detectors, heat detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, duct detectors. You know, the duct detectors are interesting because many times what we don't understand is the airflow that's necessary for smoke to get into that detector. And they have the tools to check that. Also things like aspirating detectors, battery health, and devices for testing audio. How do they do that? Well, basically there's three categories of products. One are going to be dispensing heads. You can see little images on your screen, but we'll talk about each one. Then there's the telescoping poles. And depending on how high you need to reach, you can use one or more poles together so that a technician can access, remove, lower, clean, test detectors up to 9 meters in height. And after that, it's just the consumables. You know, whether it's aerosol of synthetic smoke, cartridges of synthetic smoke, and the list goes on. So let's start with some dispensing heads. And these traditionally have been the most popular. The one on your left, that one accepts the aerosol cans. We'll show those in a second. Does a couple of very good things. Number one, it isolates the environment around the detector, because many times, since they are high, there's airflow. And that smoke that you generate, maybe with your cigarette or as you saw in the photos before, just doesn't reach the detector. So this is a way to get your job done. Prove it. Isolate the environment and put some aerosol there. And it could be carbon monoxide or smoke, depending on the type of detector. Then there's heat detectors. They also should be tested. Here's a device which will generate heat in a nice uniform way to quickly bring that detector into alarm. And one thing, if we take a step back to the maintenance aspect of it, well, we have to inspect that smoke detector. How do you do that when it's up on the ceiling? Well, this device will remove those detectors. Those little triangle pieces that you see on top change position. Each time they do, the diameter of the opening changes so that you can fit almost any detector out there. You notice I did say almost any detector. A couple of years ago, Edwards came out with a series of detector, the ST series, and there was a little button on the side you had to press in order to remove that detector from its base. So my Solo 200 is not going to work for you, but the Edwards one will. Where we come in is we have an adapter that allows you to put the Edwards device on our telescoping poles. At that point, you drop that detector, clean it out from accumulated dust, insects, or whatever, with two of the products on the side, the compressed air. So we go from the traditional pieces that so many people like to, I'm going to call it the Cadillac of detector testers, because this is multi-criteria. This can do the test for smoke, for heat, and then there's a model that will do it for carbon monoxide. So you can do all these tests simultaneously. Another way to save money, and that's kind of where we're going with a lot of this. Not only is it complying with the norm, NFPA 72, but it's doing it faster, lowering costs so that you're more competitive in your business. There's an intelligent detector, and the reason they came out with this is they realized that technicians were not always using those aerosol cans correctly. So here is a detector, has a light. Not all detectors are in well-lit places. It makes sense. It's smaller. It has a proximity sensor, so when you place it over the detector, it knows, and now it will automatically dispense the amount of smoke you need. After that, a little fan goes on so you can clear out the detector because you don't want it to keep on going into alarm. Oh, one of the nice things about that is that there's an adapter for your aspiration detectors. Yeah, they have to be tested as well. You just take off that little white cup we saw, and you add this adapter, and now you can test those aspiration detectors, Vesda, Extralis. One of the things we're not going to show today, but it is important, and you'll get an email later, so if you want to write me for some links, there's some excellent videos online which will show you about using some of these detectors. Anyway, step back here. We talked about the sensibility tester. Now, this is a totally different animal because we're checking that that detector is still within range. And although NFPA wants to see all the time, where we see it a lot is going to be things like shipping. And I understand that. Fire on a ship, where are you going to go? People want to know as quickly as possible because they want to put out that fire. Agreed? Mining, other hazardous environments, you'll see devices like this being used. So let's talk about those aerosols, because many people start with those aerosol cans of synthetic smoke to begin their journey on professionalism, conforming with NFPA 72, and reducing the time they spend. All these products are UL listed. They do not contain silicone. And I have to make mention of that because there are other products on the market. They do have silicone. And actually what you're doing is contaminating that detector at the same time you're making the test. So be careful about that. The product on the left and the one on the right, one called Centurion, the other one called A10. These can be used by hand or they can be put in that device that I showed you in the beginning. The one in the middle, that is, that's only by hand. It comes with a little, I'll call it a funnel, which expands. It's a telescoping funnel. And this does a couple of things for you. Number one, it makes sure that the technician doesn't get too close to the detector. And for any of you folks out there that have been using these products, we're going to give some instructions that, maybe you don't know, but we want to share that with you. Not only that, but it ensures that the right mixture gets to that detector. Okay, but that one can only be used by hand. And a lot of people will go with that for the beginning. Oh, on how to use those aerosols for you folks already involved or those folks thinking of getting involved in this product. One is shake it before use. And you should keep it about 12, maybe 24 inches away at the most. And you apply a 1 second burst. And I say that because, we'll see people go right up to that detector and spray as if they're writing their name on the side of a wall. It's way too much. You risk actually getting that detector dirty instead of doing your test. If you have to, wait 10 seconds before reapplying. On the opposite end of the spectrum, we've spoken to people. We had to let them know also. He says, well, the detector's really high and I start spraying that smoke. Well, yeah, it's about 8 feet away. He uses a lot of smoke to put that thing in alarm. So, there's a couple of basic steps you'll want to pay attention to. You let your technicians know as they go out to do the testing. Compressed air, whether it's the one on the left or the one on the right, the difference is the one on the right is inflammable. In some environments request that. Now, I know a lot of people will use machines of compressed air, but remember what happens. Byproduct of that compressing air and machinery is to produce moisture. Many times you're actually making that detector dirtier while you're trying to blow out that dust or insects. So here's a nice, easy way, a portable way of cleaning those detectors quickly and efficiently. Carbon monoxide, they're becoming more and more popular. And yes, they're supposed to be tested. One special note on these detectors, make sure your detector can be put into what's called fast mode, because the fast mode will allow this product, C6, to work, to put it into alarm, which is what you want to check. There are some products out there that do not allow that. So you're going to have a very hard time. I usually advise people almost always, if they can, use this with one of those devices, one of those dispensers that we showed, because it isolates the environment of the detector and makes sure that carbon monoxide gets in there. Carbon monoxide dissipates very quickly, so it can be kind of frustrating doing that exam, doing that testing. Oh, people, important question, always get asked, how many detectors can I test? And the best answer is, I don't know. What I can tell you, however, is how many bursts, how many times can you give a 1 second spray out of these? The reason I have to say it like that is because some detectors don't go into alarm in the first one for a variety of reasons. So that gives you an idea of some of the products. The ones on the right are cartridges. We'll talk about those in a second. They're all silicone-free, very important. They're all UL listed, very important. And the cartridges. We saw that intelligent smoke detector It uses a cartridge. It's not under pressure. And that's something else to be concerned about. Aerosol cans, by their very nature, it doesn't matter what the product is considered hazmat because it's under pressure. And being hazmat, there are certain rules. You need a certification. That costs money. You need a special box. That costs money to transport it. And that's just international rules. The cartridges, however, are not under pressure and they are not hazmat. So that makes it a lot easier if you have to send somebody far away, specifically by plane, to carry it with them. The one on the right, that's for the testifier, that multi-criteria device I showed you in the beginning. If the device is for smoke and heat, then you just need the top cartridge. That's for smoke. But if you get the complete device, which also can do carbon monoxide, there's a different cartridge for that. And remember, that one does it simultaneously, so that's a time saver. So NFPA 72 goes on. They talk about more things, and one of those things is battery testing. You know that better than I, that when a lead acid battery dies, there's no warning. It just goes. One moment it's good, the next moment power goes out, battery has to kick in, and it doesn't. It has failed. So you can't test that with a multimeter. You have to test it with a device like this. This checks internal resistance by means of Ohm's law of all the different cells in there. It's the battery health that it's telling you about. As a matter of fact, NFPA 72 is very specific on how the testing should be done, and this is the device that does that. Audio, another aspect. I realize sometimes we don't have a lot of respect for audio because we don't understand it. What makes things unintelligible, like voice of ACK, that we can't understand what they're saying? Oh, it's loud, but we can't understand it. So once again, there's tools out there that can help us complete our job. Because intelligibility, it's not a philosophical concept. It's a real measurement. And it's done because they look at frequencies, collisions, reverberation, different aspects of audio. And measuring it will give you a number. And that number will be from 0 to 1. The closer you are to 1, the better off you are. And you'd be surprised how many systems out there are in the bad to very bad region. Well, we need a way of measuring that so we can therefore correct bad intelligibility. This box on the left, it's a calibrated acoustic signal. It produces a signal that you can then measure. We do not hear it as humans. For us, it's just static, white noise. But for a measuring device, it needs to hear all those different signals and different frequencies. At that point, we can understand if our system needs to be adjusted. The device on the right, the SM50, that is for measuring not only decibels, but intelligibility. You know, I have people come up as far as decibels go, and they'll say, wait a minute, I got an app on my iPhone, and that's how I do decibels. And yep, you can. But no, it's not recognized by NFPA as a real test. That's them, right? Scorpion, interesting product. Because there are detectors, you guys know better than I, they're hard to access. I mean, a lot of detectors, nice and easy. You use something like one of the SDI devices, cover it up, do your test, walk to the next one, life is good. But some of those detectors are in the top of the elevator shaft, for example. Well, to get there, you need to call the elevator guy, stop service on the elevator, climb up on top, do your testing, and that's time and money. Or those stairwells with those vaulted ceilings, how do you get to that detector? Well, you build a scaffolding upon scaffolding to go up and test one detector. or restricted areas. If we're talking about military bases, embassies, hospitals, there's always areas they don't let you in so easy. You're sitting waiting on a bench while the right person has to come by and let you in, if they come by. So how do we take care of that? Well, you have a scorpion, and here's an example on the upper left-hand side, a scorpion that's there for things like aspirating equipment like Vesda. So it's put in place right on the detector. However, now it's going to be wired to a little remote console, and that console isn't an easy to access place. Imagine the room where they do operations in a hospital, MRI, embassies, the top guy's office. How do you get in there? Now you can just be outside, access your console, connect to it, do your test, and you're done. And that's Scorpion. So NFPA 72 is pretty complete. They talk about everything. They talk about control of documentation. So just to let you know, also another product available through SDI. Because they talk about certain cabinets where you have your CDs, your software revisions, and other documentation, or your plans. And we have those cabinets. Telescoping poles, my favorite part of the business, because that's the real money saver. And there's several different ones. And this gives you an idea, but one of the things that hopefully got uploaded as an accessory aside from this presentation is the catalog. In the catalog, you can take your time and read a little bit more. So depending how your jobs are, how high those ceilings are, you can make your choice. The 100 was always the standard. The 101 was the extension. And you can add up to 3 of those, and that gives you your 30 feet. Other ones like the 108 can also take extensions. Quick little note, I like to explain this. Simple fact, and maybe it's logical or intuitive, but I always think it pays to mention it. If that detector is like 6 meters up or lower, you can probably attack it at an angle as you see on the figure on the left. Not too much, because you don't want the weight of that dispenser, which isn't heavy, but still up that high, its weight begins to tip it over. Anything above 6 meters, you really have to do it straight up and down. That is the recommended practice. Speaking of recommended practices, and once again, it makes sense. First thing you do is you attach that head. You expand section 1, expand section 2, each time clicking it in, making sure everything's fine and secure, and then you raise it to cover the detector and do your tests. So I know I just threw a ton of product at you. That's why I mentioned the catalog so you can look. And they do offer some things to make life easy, like these kits. That's that intelligent detector head I mentioned. You have enough telescoping poles to reach about 20 foot. Some cartridges. Some of my customers, what they like to do is add that Solo 200, that unit that removes detectors. They're ready to go. They can send a man on the job and he's got everything he needs. For the folks who prefer testifier, well, now you have a little bit bigger of a suitcase, if you will. And that's important because you don't want these tools getting lost. So you have the way to bring them to a job, a way to store them. Has a testifier remover, enough poles to reach 24 feet, carrying bags. And one more traditional kit that a lot of people like. This one gives you the little suitcase for storing everything. Transportation bag for the telescoping poles and the heat detector, the smoke, the heat tester, the smoke tester, and the remover. And there's more. You can take a look at the catalog and that'll give you a better idea. So one of the things we talked about compliance. We're talking about the professional aspect of arriving with the right tools. But let's talk about maintenance costs. I mean, all you have to do is add it up. There was a truck that you needed to transport your ladders and your equipment. That team of men, because people had to move furniture and get things out of the way, or set up scaffolding, or steady the ladder while somebody else goes up top. There's all a cost in that. And if we can reduce that, wouldn't that be a good thing? Now, of course, people take shortcuts, right? But that's also a factor, something to factor in the cost of accidents. We don't know what happened after somebody took these pictures. Now, I'm sure you guys don't do this, but somebody probably does. Otherwise, they wouldn't have these pictures. And then there's also the cost of interrupting workers. You know, you have to ask them to leave their space, maybe move their desk. You're interrupting their routine to get your work done, and nobody likes that. And that's a cost. Maybe it's a cost of your reputation, but it's also a dollar and cents cost. Now you add all those things up and you say, should I do that? Or should I just send this guy on the right with his backpack and all the tools he needs so he can take care of the inspection and the testing, complete that maintenance contract, lower your costs, and help you get more contracts out there? The presentation is professional, it's efficient, and the cost is low.